In 1974, Nigeria was the third largest oil-producing nation in the world. Today, Nigeria does not own its own oil reserves, which is still the third largest in the world, but BP and Shell and Exxon owns all the rights of the oil in Nigeria. They take the oil out of it, and after that they sell it back to the Nigerian government. Who did that?
Hello, my beautiful people. Welcome back to the channel. I hope that you're doing fine wherever you are. And it is another beautiful day to share knowledge and to empower Africa. As usual, it is my greatest pleasure to have you on the channel. So, in today's video, I want us to talk about the giant of Africa. The giant of Africa is the nation of Nigeria, I think that we already know. And about Nigeria, I want us to talk about an issue that most of us already know about it all too well, and it is about oil and oil production and the refinery that was supposed, that is actually has been already established by one Aliko Dangote, the richest African, or I think, in fact, the richest black man alive today. Now, I want us to listen to the man himself, and after which, then we can continue with our discussion. So let's just watch this video first.
I thought building a refinery like this is, supposed to be a pride for everybody, because we're not the only country. Angola, they've been trying for 20 years. They are still trying. Uganda, they've been trying for the last 15 years. None of them. There is no production capacity in Africa. Only two countries are not importing, which is, Algeria and Libya. Apart from this, everybody is an importer. We cannot continue to be slaves while we export, raw material, then we import products. But you can see a regulator is giving an excuse to continue to issue license for bad products just because he said that no, they don't want to create a monopoly. So how can we create a monopoly?
Well, you have heard from the man himself. Now, for those of us that believe in the capacity of Africa, those of us that are optimistic enough to think that Africa should be able to self-sustain, when finally the announcement of the completion of the Dangote refinery came to life, we thought that it was a breakthrough, not only for Nigeria, but actually for the entire continent of Africa. This was going to help us, because you see, the truth is, Africa is not underdeveloped. Africa is overexploited. And the exploitation of Africa is being done by the West. And it happens through those huge corporates, and the conglomerates. Now, like in the case of oil and oil refining, we know that the suspects are those huge business conglomerates like Total, ExxonMobil, Shell, which all do not belong to Africa, but they need the African crude oil at very cheaper prices because we do not have the production, the refining capacity ourselves. So they need it, and they take it away from us at very cheap prices, and then they sell back to us petrochemicals at exorbitantly high prices, while we actually are the producers of the crude oil. Now, Dangote had this in mind, that it was time for Africa to set itself free from the chokehold, from the slavery of the West. And we know that Aliko Dangote invested a huge mega 20 billion US dollars and about a decade of time to just start an oil refinery. Now, instead of the African people coming together to celebrate the news that food is now within a stone throw distance, that we're now able to self-sustain, because I believe that even if I'm not Nigerian, it's easier for us to be able to import oil from just across the border instead of having to import it from across the sea. Now, what happened is, because the imperialists knew something about us, they fight us, and they fight us in very subtle ways. They set us against each other. See, the problem with now, the problem that rocked the Dangote oil refinery is, ironically, the NNPC, that is the corporation that is mandated to deal with oil production in Nigeria. They started accusing some false allegations towards the Dangote refinery, that the production, the produce, the final good, wasn't of good quality. And this was actually debunked when Dangote himself invited people from the Nigerian government to come and inspect the quality of the finished product from his refinery, and only for them to realize that it was actually of higher quality than what is actually already existing in the market. And then again, they accused him of monopoly. A monopoly? The West has monopolized and commodified Africa for almost all of our existence. How is it, in fact, if it was Dangote to monopolize, I think it is better for him to monopolize his own land than a foreigner to do the same, because the foreigner is not sparing either. And now they started accusing him of monopolizing the industry, and which is just but a lame excuse, because the government as a government can always set precedents and regulate a market such that such occurrences do not happen. Now, the truth is, it has nothing to do with the quality of Dangote's oil refinery. It has nothing to do with monopoly, as they say. The truth is, the fight is not actually by us. It is a fight of proxy. It is, by extension, the West that has known that the best way to fight the black person is to use a black person. Now, we know who is using the Nigerian government to fight Dangote, because the obvious result of a functioning 20 billion mega project oil refinery was going to throw a lot of people out of the market. And we know who they are. We know who these people are. We know that they are not going to just take this lying on their backs. They're not just going to lose such a huge market. Now, another producer is Angola. Angola and Nigeria, being the largest oil producers in a continent, they still import over 80% of petrochemicals in the country, despite the fact that we are the one that are producing the crude oil. Why is it that, Aliko Dangote invested 20 billion in the project? Does it mean that African nations, African governments, and African countries cannot afford a 20 billion refinery? That's not the truth. We know that the truth is we are being fought, and nobody is just going to have it easy to try and throw those guys out of the market that easy. It is time for us to really look back into history and into the trends that led us to where we are if we have to revert the situation. There is no way we are going to be out of this situation without having to observe the trends of what has been happening. Now, there is a lot of oil in Africa, let alone, I mean, just leave alone the case of Nigeria and Angola and those other major oil producers in Africa. We have more countries that are in a position to produce oil in Africa. The thing is, there's a chokehold on the oil industry in Africa, and it is an historical injustice. In Kenya, a few years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, we discovered we have oil deposits. And the common citizen, a common Kenyan, was elated and thought that, this is a breakthrough. But the truth is, the discovery of oil deposits in Kenya is not a thing of 5 or 4 years ago. We knew this thing a long time ago, but because those that have a stranglehold on Africa are, they do this, they actually have that as their reserve. So they're exploiting my neighbor so they can come to me as well. So I'm not going to escape the trap. Uganda as well, the other day, just discovered that they had oil deposits. Actually, the term discovered usually comes to the surface when the imperialist is now ready to try and attempt to exploit the product. Otherwise, these discoveries have always been there, have always been made decades ago. But because they were yet to be ready to exploit, then what they do is they put everybody in the dark until the time they are ready to exploit. I'm saying this is an historical injustice because it has nothing, propaganda is a very strong political tool. And the way to fight this is we have to create the awareness, continue without tire. We cannot afford to let this spirit die off. We have to keep preaching one thing over and over and over again, because that is how propaganda is also done. So to counter propaganda, we have to also preach the good news over and over again, because you look down through history and you will realize the truth that we have been going through a period of propaganda where they set us against one another, they set our neighbors against one another. They attack us by using our own friends. And it's just time, I believe it's just time for Africa to wake up to this reality.
The IMF and the World Bank, these are the Kafirs we're dealing with. Second, making the dollar, whether it is the Australian dollar or the French dollar, or we call them dollars, but we know they call them different currencies, making the currency in the West prevalent as a source of value and eliminating the gold. Because when gold becomes the standard, the countries who have the gold become what? The possessors of the wealth. But they tricked the world and they took the currency and made it the wealth. And so then they took the wealth, paper dollars, and then they took and bought the gold from those countries with paper. So they took the gold and they own it now. All the gold is in Fort Knox and some other places, and they gave those people currency. Then after they gave them the currency, they depreciated the currency through wars. Then they told them now you can borrow more currency, okay, at 20%. And so now they own the country. Devils. Tricksters. Continuing to make developing countries markets for consumption. So the Muslims become consumer societies. They don't produce anything. Drowning the developing countries with compound interest through the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. and we can go on, but we don't have the time.
It's definitely so shameful that we are being used to fight our own selves. We can't afford to be in this fight divided. We can't afford to fail to learn that it is through the divide and rule tactic that these people have subjugated us for decades. Now we have to come together, we have to support each other, to support ourselves if we are to win this war. We have come to the end of this video. I hope you are going to be sharing your thoughts, your ideas in the comments. Like and share this video and subscribe to this channel. Until next time, see you in the next video. Peace.